In the shadows of the dark city, flesh is but clay. Deep within the nightmare labyrinths of Commorragh, where pain is the highest currency and torment is an art, a lone Imperial Guard trooper awakens to a fate beyond mortal comprehension. His captor is no mere torturer, but something far worse, a master sculptor of suffering, a being whose works transcend flesh and time. Here, agony is refined into perfection, and the boundaries between existence and oblivion are but a whisper. In the depths of this waking nightmare, the question is not whether he will survive, but what he will become. Welcome to the Grand Hall of Pain. Darkness, absolute and suffocating. It coils around the chamber like a sentient thing, broken only by the intermittent flickering of bioluminescent growths, pulsing with a sickly green hue. The air is thick with the fetid stench of decay and chemical rot, mingling with the distant, muted echoes of long-since silenced screams. A ragged breath cuts through the stagnant air, sharp and panicked. The Imperial Guard trooper awakens with a shuddering gasp, his senses flooded by an overwhelming cacophony of sensations, cold, wet, and the suffocating pressure of something alive beneath him. His limbs twitch in reflex, but they do not move. Bound, restrained, imprisoned. He hangs within a grotesque prison of living bone and sinew, his arms and legs splayed wide, each joint secured by sinewy strands of organic matter that pulse with a sickening rhythmic vitality. The cage flexes slightly with his every struggle, as if savoring his fear. His mouth opens, trembling lips forming the shape of a scream that will not come. His eyes, pried open by delicate, needle-thin clamps, are forced to take in the horror that surrounds him. Towering walls of grotesque, undulating flesh stretch far into the shadowed recesses of the chamber, their surfaces stitched with veins like blackened roots. They pulse in time with an unseen heartbeat, a relentless reminder of the malevolence that pervades this place. Viscous fluids ooze through transparent tubes embedded within the tissue, carrying unidentifiable humors that bubble and writhe in their containment. Barbed chains, rusted and wet with the residue of ages past, hang like a cruel tapestry from the vaulted ceiling, swaying ever so slightly. Some of them still carry remnants, scraps of torn fabric, fragments of flayed skin, the occasional gleaming shard of exposed bone. Each link whispers a story of agony suffered, of lives unmade. Before him, grotesque sculptures stand in obscene tableau, flesh-warped forms of previous victims, their faces twisted in eternal screams, their bodies reformed into grotesque effigies of the Haemonculus' twisted artistry. A figure, stripped of skin, its musculature painstakingly resewn into intricate patterns, stands posed as if in silent prayer. Another, its ribcage splayed open to reveal a living heart encased in crystal, pulses in mechanical rhythm, kept alive for reasons too dreadful to comprehend. And there, at the far end of the chamber, rows upon rows of alchemical vials bubble and seethe with ominous vitality. The fluids within them churn and writhe, pulsing with unnatural colors, luminous purples, sickly greens, and caustic yellows. Some contain pieces of things that should not move, writhing remnants of what might once have been human. The trooper's pulse quickens, his heart hammering against his ribs, his breathing ragged and desperate. His eyes dart around, searching for escape, but finding none. Only the unrelenting grip of the living prison that holds him. Its barbed touch whispering a promise of the suffering yet to come. The chamber breathes with him, a grotesque, mocking imitation of life, and somewhere in the distance the soft echo of footsteps. Calm, measured, inevitable. And then a shiver races down his spine. The darkness shifts. Something beyond the trooper's shattered comprehension moves within the cavernous abyss, gliding with the grace of a predator that has never known haste. It is a whisper of motion, a silhouette in the half-light cast by pulsating organic growths lining the chamber walls. The creature emerges like a malign wraith, a shadow of malice and precision made manifest. Adorned in flowing robes of stitched, writhing skin, the creature's very presence is an affront to nature. The living veins within the fabric pulse in sickening rhythm, their sluggish movement mirroring the careful, languid steps of the being beneath. The being does not walk, it drifts, an ethereal spectre of torment in an eternal masquerade of agony. Its face, a thing stretched and elongated beyond human recognition, looms into the trooper's forced open gaze. The flesh is pulled taut over a bone-white skull, lips thin and stretched into something akin to a smirk of cold amusement. Hollow, ink-black eyes, depthless and devoid of anything resembling mercy, observe their new canvas with an air of detached fascination. There is no hunger, no hatred. Only the meticulous curiosity of a sculptor appraising raw material. The voice follows, an abomination of sound. Silk dragged across razors, soft yet filled with a hidden edge that burrows deep into the mind.
Ah, yes, you are awake. How delicious.
A skeletal hand, jointed unnaturally long and adorned with wicked talons, caresses the air with an obscene gentleness. The trooper's body spasms in its restraints, instinctively recoiling from the mere proximity of such calculated cruelty. The creature leans in, its breath carrying the cloying aroma of formaldehyde and something more, something alive.
Welcome, monkey.
The voice coos, its tone oozing with mockery and patient menace.
You will find that your life has only just begun. The flesh is such a versatile thing, and I shall conduct a symphony upon yours that will echo through the centuries.
A slow shudder runs through the captive's battered form, but the restraints, bone and sinew, pulsing and shifting, hold him fast. The being straightens, towering above him in its perverse glory, the prehensile spine, a serpentine coil of segmented bone and writhing musculature, slithers behind it with an unsettling grace, curving and twisting as if in silent contemplation. From beneath the living robes, multiple limbs unfurl, each ending in grotesque surgical implements that twitch and hum in anticipation. Scalpels honed to monomolecular edges, delicate syringes filled with luminescent toxins, and serrated forceps crafted to peel flesh from bone with agonizing precision. Slowly the creature begins to circle its prize, its gait languid, detached. The air is thick with the scent of damp meat, of blood not yet spilled but promised in abundance. The trooper's breath quickens into ragged gasps, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped animal. One of the many needle-like talons traces the surface of his exposed chest, a touch that is more intimate than any should ever endure. The homunculus's expression does not change. It simply watches, head tilting ever so slightly, savoring the tremors beneath the skin.
Yes, you will do beautifully.
The words slither into the trooper's ears, a whispered sentence of eternal torment. He trembles, a puppet strung by sinew and agony, his wide, unblinking eyes reflecting the horror before him. Behind the creature, the grotesque sinew webworks pulsate in the dim light, casting flickering shadows of former victims, monstrous sculptures of past failures and triumphs, their hollowed faces twisted in expressions of enduring, never-ending agony. The alchemical vials upon the distant shelves churn and bubble, as if in celebration of another offering to the art of suffering. And then the being halts its circling. For the first time in the unrelenting suffocation of the chamber, the trooper sees it for what it truly is, a haemonculus. The realization crushes him with a weight far beyond his physical torment, an abyssal understanding that he is no longer in the grasp of mere cruelty, but in the hands of a master artisan of agony. The haemonculus, a revered and feared sculptor of flesh, leers down at the trembling form beneath it. Its elongated, skull-like visage twists into something grotesquely akin to amusement, its many limbs twitching with anticipation. The glint of sharpened steel catches the dim light as a slender scalpel clicks into place within one of its many hands, a herald of artistry to come. It does not strike, not yet. Instead, it simply smiles.
We have so much time.
The trooper's scream, raw and choked, barely manages to escape his lips before the first incision is even made. The haemonculus leans in close, its voice a venomous whisper that coils around the trooper's fractured mind like a constricting serpent.
Flesh is fleeting, Monkey, but under my hand you shall transcend the mundane. You shall become something far greater.
The words drip with mockery and dark promise, sinking into the trooper's consciousness like hooks into raw meat. His ragged breaths come faster, the veins in his neck bulging with the strain of silent terror, his eyes darting in panicked futility, but the restraints, living things of sinew and bone, tighten in response, shivering in ecstasy at his struggle.
Art takes time,
The haemonculus muses, its skeletal fingers dancing lightly over the trooper's exposed chest, the needle-tipped talons tracing the trembling surface with an artisan's reverence. Its elongated face, a grotesque mask of pleasure and cold detachment, watches with unsettling focus. Every twitch, every tremor, every pulse of the trooper's hammering heart is a brushstroke upon an unseen canvas. The first incision is made, a razor-thin scalpel, honed to monomolecular sharpness, glides effortlessly across flesh, parting it with a whispering sigh. Skin peels away like parchment, layer by delicate layer, revealing the crimson lattice of muscle beneath. The haemonculus works with methodical precision, ensuring nerve endings remain intact, every strand exposed, every fiber preserved in exquisite sensitivity. The trooper's scream is instantaneous, raw and animalistic, a tortured wail that reverberates through the darkened corridors beyond. The chamber itself seems to drink it in, the walls twitching in silent appreciation of the suffering unfolding within their depths. The haemonculus does not flinch. It merely tilts its head, observing the rivulets of blood, tracing slow paths down the trooper's ribs. The haemonculus watches with the detached air of a sculptor admiring their medium, each drop of crimson sliding from the exposed muscles like precious ink.
Ah, beautiful, but not yet perfect.
With measured grace, it reaches for a set of gleaming forceps, the serrated edges clicking together with an eager insectile chittering. Delicately, it pinches a trembling nerve bundle and pulls. The trooper's back arches violently, his body convulsing in a desperate, futile attempt to escape. His teeth clamp down so hard they crack, blood flecking his lips, but the Haemonculus simply tightens the restraints further. The trooper's mind teeters on the edge of madness, each new sensation driving him deeper into the abyss of agony. Yet the Haemonculus is a master of prolonging life, of ensuring no sweet escape will come. Nearby, vats of alchemical fluids bubble ominously, casting an eerie phosphorescent glow across the grotesque scene. Within their murky depths, suspended fragments of living tissue twitch and pulse, as though yearning to escape, to be stitched into some horrifying masterpiece. Tendrils of unknown matter writhe languidly inside the containers, their every movement a promise of horrors yet to come. The Haemonculus pauses only briefly, turning its soulless gaze toward the pulsing vials.
Patience, my little ones. Soon he will join you.
The trooper can do nothing but writhe and sob as the Haemonculus returns to its work, continuing the meticulous flaying with a precision that borders on the divine. Flaps of skin are carefully peeled back, the trooper's chest laid bare like an anatomical display, muscles trembling and exposed to the cold air. The Haemonculus hums softly to itself, a disturbingly gentle tune that echoes through the chamber with eerie finality. With surgical artistry, it traces the edge of the trooper's exposed ribs, its talons moving with the grace of a concert pianist. The Haemonculus's prehensile spine coils in satisfaction, a faint tremor of amusement shuddering through its grotesque frame.
Do you feel it yet?
The Haemonculus whispers, the words slick with sickening delight.
Your essence unfurling, your pathetic humanity stripped away. Ah, what a waste it would have been to leave you to die in battle. This is the true purpose of flesh.
As another layer is slowly, excruciatingly peeled back, the trooper's body jerks and twitches uncontrollably, yet his mind is held sharp and present, an unwilling witness to his own unmaking. Sobs, screams, and ragged breathing merge into a grotesque symphony that fills the air, only punctuated by the bubbling hiss of the ever-watchful vats and the rhythmic snip of the Haemonculus's instruments at work. With a final, artful stroke, the Haemonculus steps back for a moment, admiring the tableau of suffering it has begun to sculpt. It gently wipes the edge of its scalpel against its robe of living skin, the flesh writhing hungrily to absorb the remnants of its work.
We are just beginning, Monkey. Soon you shall be more than flesh. You shall be art.
The trooper's eyes, forced open, dry and bloodshot, stare into the suffocating abyss above, but he no longer sees darkness. He sees eternity. The trooper's screams had long since dissolved into ragged, breathless gasps, his body trembling in its grotesque suspension. Yet despite the layers of agony that had been meticulously carved into him, consciousness clung stubbornly to his mind, a cruel gift granted by the artistry of the Haemonculus. A whisper, dry and brittle as old parchment, slithered through the oppressive air.
Imperfection is an insult.
The Haemonculus spoke softly, almost tenderly, as if confiding in a beloved companion. Its skeletal fingers, adorned with cruel barbed instruments, hovered above the trooper's exposed abdomen, their talons twitching in anticipation. The trooper's innards, glistening under the eerie phosphorescent glow of the chamber's bubbling alchemical vats, pulsed weakly within their crystalline stasis fields, an obscene display of living anatomy, frozen in time, preserved to prolong his torment. Suspended in the delicate embrace of sinew-bound restraints, his limbs hung limply, held in the cruel grasp of organic tendrils that pulsed with a sickening, sluggish rhythm. The homunculus worked with an unhurried, languid grace, carefully teasing apart tendons and ligaments like a master weaver unraveling an ancient tapestry. Each sinew was drawn taut, glistening strands separated with meticulous precision, their delicate fibers twitching under the surgeon's cold touch. The trooper could feel everything. Shock had been denied to him, the homunculus ensuring his suffering would be savored in excruciating clarity. Stasis fields encased his severed limbs, rendering them inert but alive, forcing him to endure the unimaginable sensation of his body being rearranged piece by piece. The homunculus hummed softly, an unsettling melody that resonated through the chamber with a gentle malice. With a long, bone-thin scalpel, it traced the edges of the trooper's exposed nerves, its expression one of distant curiosity.
So much potential, but crude. A pity, really.
With deliberate care, it rearranged the trooper's nerves, drawing them out like the strings of a musical instrument. A pluck here, a twist there, a delicate severing followed by the insertion of an intricate lattice of organic threads. Each adjustment brought forth new levels of suffering, a kaleidoscope of agony painted across the trooper's contorted face. His body convulsed involuntarily, muscles spasming under the cold, detached artistry of the homunculus, who merely observed with quiet fascination. The raw meat of the trooper's flayed chest heaved and shuddered, his heartbeat an erratic staccato beneath the homunculus's steady, unhurried hands.
Yes, I see it now. A new arrangement, something more pleasing.
With a deft flick of a needle-thin scalpel, the homunculus sliced through another tendon, relishing the way the flesh recoiled under his touch. He reached for a set of delicate vials, slender, translucent containers, filled with a shimmering, viscous fluid of impossible colors. The trooper barely had the strength to groan in protest as the first of the poisons was introduced, the needle piercing directly into an exposed nerve bundle. The effect was immediate. Every sensation, every whisper of air, every pulse of pain magnified tenfold. A shuddering whimper escaped the trooper's cracked lips, his lungs burning with effort as his body betrayed him utterly. His nerves ignited like molten wires, sending waves of torment cascading through his ruined form. The homunculus stepped back momentarily, folding its many arms with calculated satisfaction, observing its latest experiment with a critical eye.
Now, each movement shall be a tribute to pain. Exquisite, yes.
The trooper's scream, hoarse and broken, echoed through the labyrinthine corridors of the coven, reverberating off walls lined with grotesque relics of flesh and bone. From their niches, disfigured racks stirred at the sound, their stitched mouths quivering in eerie anticipation, their rusted surgical appendages twitching with jealous need. The homunculus paid them no mind, his gaze fixed solely upon his living canvas. He knelt beside the trooper, his elongated features betraying nothing but a distant curiosity, and whispered with the intimacy of a lover.
Soon, Monkey, soon your suffering will be perfection.
With a flick of his wrist, he reached for another implement, a serrated organic drill that pulsed and twitched in his grip like a living thing. The homunculus smiled coldly, the instruments in his many hands glistening with fresh blood, ready to continue his work. The torment was far from over. The homunculus stood over the trembling husk of the trooper, its elongated fingers curling with a predatory grace. The trooper's body was already a ruin of exposed sinew and meticulously peeled flesh, his nerves manipulated with cruel artistry, but physical suffering was never enough. True art required a deeper incision, a dissection of the mind.
Pain is but a single note in a grand symphony,
the homunculus whispered, its voice slick with malice. It reached for a sleek, chitinous parasite, writhing and glistening with an unnatural wetness, tendrils questing hungrily in the cold, damp air. The creature, no larger than a human hand, pulsated with a sinister intelligence as it was lowered toward the trooper's forehead. A sharp, insectile screech filled the chamber as the parasite burrowed into his skull, its tendrils coiling into his brain matter with agonizing slowness. The trooper's mouth opened in a silent scream, his eyes bulging with raw terror as the creature rooted deep within his mind. Then the memories began. The homunculus watched with detached amusement as the trooper's body convulsed against his restraints, his mind forced to relive every horror, every trauma, every failure. The parasite was a masterful creation, weaving a tapestry of despair that tightened with each cycle, an eternal loop of agony, growing more exquisite with every repetition. The trooper's screams, once visceral, soon gave way to ragged, broken sobs as the parasite peeled apart his psyche layer by layer, exposing the soft underbelly of his fears and regrets. The homunculus circled him like a vulture, its horn-like bone protrusions casting monstrous shadows across the chamber walls.
Ah, how fascinating the mortal mind is, so fragile, so malleable.
The homunculus mused, its prehensile spine coiling like a serpent behind it.
Hope can be such a delightful illusion, can it not?
With a deliberate gesture, it activated a nearby control panel, sending waves of fabricated light and sound into the trooper's fractured mind. The illusion took shape. His comrades, alive, victorious, escaping the dark halls of Commorragh. A glimpse of salvation, a flicker of hope. And then, with surgical precision, the homunculus shattered it. The trooper watched as his comrades' faces twisted into grotesque, flayed visages. Not survivors, but prisoners like himself. Their features twisted beyond recognition, their voices wailing in endless, discordant agony. He screamed anew, his throat raw and torn, yet the illusion persisted, repeating itself in a macabre cycle of false salvation and soul-crushing despair. The homunculus watched, eyes glimmering with cruel delight. It leaned in, whispering in a tone dripping with venomous amusement.
Every hope you clutch will become a blade that flays you anew. Every memory will be a wound I shall deepen.
Beyond the edges of the chamber, misshapen figures stirred in the gloom, drawn to the suffering like moths to a flame. The racks, once Druhkari, now something far worse. Hunched, grotesque things of flayed flesh, stretched over rusted iron, their visages locked in eternal torment. They shuffled closer, their breath rattling like dying whispers, their movements jerky and mechanical. Needles, saws, and scalpels adorned their twisted limbs, each one a living testament to the homunculus's artistry.
Soon,
they hissed in broken, rasping voices, a chorus of ruin that sent shivers crawling down the trooper's mangled spine.
you will be one of us.
The trooper thrashed against his restraints, his body racked with sobs as the racks caressed him with rusted digits, tracing the delicate lines of his exposed flesh. Their touch was gentle, reverent, as if welcoming him into their ranks, an inevitable transformation into one of their own.
They were once like you, monkey,
The Haemonculus said softly, watching the racks with something akin to pride.
Now they are art, and so shall you be.
The darkness seemed to thicken, closing in around the trooper as his mind splintered under the relentless assault of terror. But the horror was not yet complete. A low, wet gurgle echoed from the far side of the chamber. It approached. From the shadows emerged a grotesque, a towering monstrosity stitched from the remnants of dozens of unfortunate souls. A mass of twitching muscle, mismatched limbs, and sightless, multi-eyed horror, it loomed beside the Haemonculus, its gargantuan form dripping with ichor and raw flesh. The many eyes adorning its face twitched in horrid unison, staring with a grotesque curiosity at the suffering laid before it. The grotesque gurgled, a thick strand of drool slithering down its ruined chin, and reached out with a colossal malformed hand to touch the trooper's ravaged torso. Its fingers, slick and oozing, pressed against the freshly exposed muscle with the tenderness of a lover, marveling at the agony that radiated from the ruined form.
Do you see, little monkey?
The Haemonculus purred, tracing a claw down the trooper's bloodied cheek.
This is the future that awaits you.
The trooper, his mind shattered, let out a strangled sob as the grotesque's massive fingers flexed, testing the give of his exposed ribs. The racks watched with hungry fascination, and the Haemonculus simply smiled, savoring the layers of suffering, the exquisite symphony of agony that he had composed.
We are only at the beginning,
The Haemonculus whispered. As the parasite burrowed deeper into his mind, as the racks whispered in anticipation, and as the grotesque loomed above him, the trooper's vision swam in a haze of pain and despair. There was no escape. There never would be.